Imagine a scenario where the Pentagon needs to shut down a rogue military artificial intelligence system.
Right.
But when they go to do it, they discover they don't actually have the administrative rights to pull the plug.
Yeah, which is terrifying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why? Because a foreign nation literally holds the keys. Now, I mean, that sounds like the plot of some cheap sci-fi thriller, right?
Absolutely.
But according to this fierce, rapidly escalating debate right now in Washington, it might actually be about to become United States law.
Yeah, and it represents a massive, just a massive structural shift in how the U.S. military operates.
Right.
And it is happening so quietly. It's buried deep within a piece of legislation that, honestly, almost no one reads in its entirety.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're glad you're here with us. We are tearing into a highly charged political and military debate, and it's centered around one, very obscure provision.
Hidden right inside the House's version of the 2027 National Defense Authorization Act.
Yeah, the NDAA. And this provision is called Section 224. Okay, let's unpack this. To understand why this is causing such an uproar, we are relying on a recent, intensely critical commentary from the progressive YouTube network, the Young Turks, or TYT.
But wait, before we go a single step further, we need to pause and make something explicitly clear to you, our listener.
Yes, very important.
The source material we are analyzing today contains heavily partisan, politically charged, and honestly, highly provocative content.
Oh, absolutely. And we are not taking sides here today.
No.
At all.
No.
We're not endorsing the viewpoints of the Young Turks, nor are we, endorsing any of the politicians, the policies, or the foreign nations mentioned in their commentary.
Right. Our sole job on this deep dive is just to impartially report on the arguments presented in the source material.
Yeah.
So you can understand the exact nature of this debate. And the angle here, what makes this particular debate so fascinating is the framing.
Yeah.
Because the source we're looking at is firmly progressive.
Very progressive.
Yet their core arguments against Section 224 deeply overlap with right-leaning, centrist, and populist America First concerns.
It's wild.
It is. The arguments are heavily rooted in U.S. sovereignty, the protection of military secrets, and strict fiscal responsibility.
We are seeing a total political horseshoe here.
Yeah.
You have some of the most progressive Democrats and the most populist America First Republicans suddenly looking at each other and agreeing that, wow, this provision is a disaster for the United States.
A total disaster, according to them.
Right. But to understand why this political odd couple is fighting the bill, we first have to understand the actual mechanics of Section 224.
Right. So to set the stage, the NDAA is a must-pass bill.
Right. They have to pass it.
Exactly. It's the annual legislation that literally funds the Pentagon.
Yeah.
And because lawmakers know it has to pass just to keep the military running, they frequently use it as a vehicle.
To bury stuff.
Exactly. To bury smaller, highly consequential provisions that might never survive a standalone vote.
So according to our source, which actually cites reporting from Responsible Statecraft, Section 224 lays the groundwork for a complete and total marriage between the U.S. and Israeli militaries.
Marriage.
Yeah, their word. They outline how this provision expands coordination into seemingly every area of modern defense technology. I mean, we're talking about bilateral research and development, co-production of weapons, and joint ventures in artificial intelligence.
Quantum computing.
Right, quantum. Autonomous systems, directed energy, cyber, and even biotech.
But the critical phrase, the one that the TYT commentators really latch on to,
Yeah.
the mechanism that changes this from a standard alliance into something completely different, is network integration and data fusion.
Right, and we need to pause on that because, data fusion sounds like a harmless tech buzzword.
It does.
But what does that actually mean in practice for a military system? Like, instead of just lending a friend some cash or maybe your car, this is like putting them on your joint bank account and giving them the password to your digital life.
That's a great analogy. What's fascinating here is how modern military AI is actually developed. It relies on massive interconnected data lakes. If you're training a neural network to, say, operate a swarm of autonomous drones, it learns from millions of data points, right? Terrain maps, target recognition algorithms, signal intelligence.
Oh, that's constantly learning.
Exactly. So when you integrate networks and engage in data fusion with another country, it's not like simply plugging in a shared hard drive that you can just unplug later.
Right.
It's more like two nervous systems growing together.
Yeah.
Once those digital synapses connect to train a shared military AI, you cannot surgically separate the American intelligence data from the Israeli intelligence data without effectively killing the whole system.
Oh, wow. So whoever holds the keys to that AI holds the keys to everything it learned from both nations.
Exactly.
I mean, that fundamentally alters the relationship.
It completely changes it.
Our source quotes Joe Kent, a former counterterrorism official under President Trump. And he argues that Section 224 transitions the traditional aid relationship into a deep structural partnership.
A structural partnership.
Yeah. It gives Israel what he calls unprecedented access to U.S. technology development. But it's not just digital, is it? It's physical manufacturing, too.
Yes. And that is a massive, massive departure from historical norms.
How so?
Well, historically, when the U.S. provides arms packages to an ally, those weapons are manufactured entirely in the United States by American defense contractors.
Right. American jobs, American factories.
Exactly. But according to the analysis presented by TY2, Section 224 changes that physical logistics model. It literally allows Israeli manufacturers to legally operate production facilities right here on U.S. soil, as long as they have an American partner.
Wait, really? So an Israeli defense company could essentially, set up shop in Ohio, receive U.S. defense dollars to build weapons, and retain shared ownership of the intellectual property.
That is precisely the mechanism the source is criticizing. And that brings us right to the heart of the America First perspective that this progressive outlet is echoing.
Right?
Because if you have merged your military nervous systems and your physical defense manufacturing, the immediate next question is about trust, security, and, well, ultimate U.S. sovereignty.
Right. Let's talk about the sovereignty and security dilemma, because if Israeli military networks are completely embedded inside U.S. military networks, the commentators argue it will be physically and technologically impossible to extract them.
Right.
And they actually raise potential constitutional issues here, specifically Fourth Amendment violations.
Yeah, and that's a huge claim. The Fourth Amendment protects Americans against unreasonable searches and seizures.
Right.
The concern raised by the TYT commentators is that if foreign intelligence networks are completely fused with U.S. military and domestic intelligence databases,
then what happens to the firewalls?
Exactly. Foreign entities could potentially gain access to highly classified U.S. information or even data on American citizens without going through traditional U.S. legal warrants. You are essentially bypassing the firewall.
That is wild. To justify this level of profound distrust, the TYT commentators dig into some pretty controversial history.
They really do.
They allege that Israel has a history of stealing U.S. military secrets. They specifically point to figures like Jonathan Pollard, who, was famously convicted of spying for Israel.
Right, and Robert Maxwell.
Exactly, Robert Maxwell. The hosts claim these figures not only stole highly sensitive U.S. technology, but in some cases actually sold those secrets to the Soviet Union.
Yeah, and by bringing up that history, the source is trying to hammer home a really stark geopolitical reality, which is that an ally is still a foreign nation.
Period.
Right. A foreign nation will always have its own distinct national interests. And inevitably, there will be moments in history where those objectives run counter to U.S. interests. So the America First argument here is that by integrating militaries to this degree, the United States is quietly surrendering its independent command and control.
I mean, if a foreign military is entirely embedded in our data infrastructure, who is actually calling the shots in a crisis?
That's the million-dollar question.
But hold on. Even if we accept the security risks of data fusion, there is another massive angle here.
Oh, the financial angle.
Yes. Here's where it gets really interesting. The source pivots hard to the financial side of this, claiming this whole integration is essentially a fiscal shell game.
A shell game?
Yeah. Why is money suddenly the driving force behind Section 224?
Well, you have to look at the shifting political landscape regarding foreign aid. The commentary cites polling, which suggests that roughly 60% of Americans currently hold an unfavorable view of direct military funding to Israel.
Right, 60%. That's a clear majority.
It is. So they argue that because American voters are turning against direct, highly visible foreign aid packages, politicians in Washington are actively looking for legislative workarounds.
Oh, I see.
They want to keep the funding flowing without having to call it aid on the nightly news.
And the source brings the receipts on how this workaround operates, too. They detail a proposal from Republican Representative Marlin Stutzman.
Right.
Stutzman pitched an idea to replace traditional aid with what he calls trade.
Trade over aid.
Exactly. He called for a new era where the nations contribute equally and share results equally, framing it as shared defense.
Yeah.
And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu even wrote a letter directly praising Stutzman's proposal, saying he was heartened by this new framework of joint defense cooperation and co-development.
Now, look closely at the mechanics of that pivot.
Okay.
When the U.S. sends foreign aid, that money is highly visible. It gets debated openly on the floor. It
Yeah.
faces public scrutiny.
Right, everybody sees the dollar amount.
Exactly.
Oh.
But when you rebrand that money as co-development or network integration, it gets buried inside the massive, opaque $1.5 trillion budget of the Department of Defense.
Oh, wow.
It becomes just a line item for research and development rather than a geopolitical aid package.
So the hosts at TYT are arguing that this trade over aid concept is just an outright trick.
Essentially, yes.
It's a mechanism to let a foreign military tap directly into the Pentagon's budget without the American taxpayer realizing they're footing the bill.
Correct. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, let's view this through a macroeconomic lens, which is really where the right-leaning fiscal conservative anchor comes from.
Right.
The U.S. national debt is currently sitting at $40 trillion.
40 trillion.
Yeah. And President Trump has signaled a desire to massively increase the Pentagon budget. The source argues that this budget expansion is tied directly to this newly integrated defense structure.
Wait, if Israel is getting access to our multi-trillion-dollar R&D pipeline, what exactly are American taxpayers getting in return?
Right.
I mean, the establishment argument is usually that we get access to their cutting-edge tech, right? Is the U.S. paying for the development while Israel just gets the final product?
That is exactly the counter-argument TYT presents. They assert that the U.S. originates the technology and funds the development entirely, while the Israeli military gets the full advantage of the final product.
Like the AI or the drone swarms.
Exactly, without having to spend their own sovereign wealth to build it from scratch.
Wow.
From a fiscal conservative perspective, this is enraging. Fiscal conservatives want American tax dollars spent exclusively on American domestic interests and American defense.
Not a joint bank account.
Right. Using co-development loopholes to essentially back-channel the fruits of a massive U.S. defense budget, they feel it violates their core tenets of fiscal responsibility.
I mean, with American sovereignty and billions of taxpayer dollars on the line, you would think this would be a massive publicized fight in Congress.
You really would.
But the battle over this has completely scrambled traditional party lines. Let's look at the actual legislative fight over Section 224, because it gets deep into committee politics.
It does.
Progressive Representative Ro Khanna offered an amendment in the House Armed Services Committee to strip this provision entirely from the NDAA.
Right.
His argument was straightforward. America should call its own shots, not the prime minister of any other country.
Yet when it came time to vote on stripping the provision, Khanna was practically alone.
Alone?
Yeah, only one other Democrat on the committee voted with him, Representative Sarah Jacobs.
Which is fascinating because if this provision is such an obvious threat to U.S. sovereignty and fiscal responsibility, why did only one Democrat vote to strip it out? What is the establishment's argument for keeping this?
The establishment defense, which was voiced by Representative Adam Smith, he's the ranking Democrat on the Armed Services Committee, is that the U.S. desperately needs this integration.
Okay, why?
Smith argued that America significantly benefits from Israeli technology development, particularly in areas like missile defense and cyber warfare. He basically claimed that stopping this integration would actively degrade U.S. military capabilities.
But our progressive source dismisses Smith's argument entirely, right?
Oh, completely.
They claim it's a flat-out lie designed to serve military contractors and foreign lobbyists.
Yes, TYT argues that the actual political motivation has absolutely nothing to do with shared tech and everything to do with defense contractor lobbying.
Ah, follow the money.
Always.
Yeah.
Remember the manufacturing provision we discussed earlier?
Right, setting up factories in Ohio or wherever.
Exactly. If an Israeli company partners with an American defense contractor to build a facility in a congressional district, that brings jobs and pay money to that specific politician.
Oh, I see.
And the source basically challenges anyone to point to specific technologies Israel has given the U.S. that the U.S. didn't originally fund or fundamentally develop in the first place.
And the source makes a very specific point about Sarah Jacobs, the lone Democrat who stood with Ro Khanna. They mention that Jacobs is Jewish and has family in Israel. They highlight her vote to explicitly debunk the establishment claims that opposing this bill is somehow anti-Semitic, or that questioning military integration means you don't care about the safety of Israeli citizens.
Yeah, that was a key point they made.
Jacobs pushed back against her own colleagues, arguing that this isn't traditional coordination, it is a structural merging of infrastructure that just goes too far.
But despite Khanna and Jacobs, the amendment was struck down. And this leads to some brutal infighting within the progressive wing.
Oh yeah, the TYT hosts absolutely tear into their own progressive leaders over this.
They did not hold back.
No. They call out highly visible figures like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the head of the Progressive Caucus, Greg Sazer, for staying completely silent on Section 224.
The commentators allege that these prominent progressives are basically keeping their powder dry to appease the mainstream media and the Democratic establishment. The accusation is that they are protecting their future political ambitions and, committee assignments, rather than fighting a bill that fundamentally contradicts progressive anti-war and anti-interventionist values.
And then, in a moment of sheer political whiplash, these progressive commentators pivot and actually praise populist America First Republicans.
I know it's crazy.
They explicitly commend Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene. Why? Because regardless of their other politics, those Republicans were willing to risk their careers and endure establishment blowback to loudly oppose this military integration and defend American domestic sovereignty.
This raises an important question, really, about modern political alignment, because it demonstrates a massive gaping wedge in modern American politics.
Yeah.
On one side, you have the establishment wings of both the Democratic and Republican parties universally supporting deep military integration and the defense contractor ecosystem.
Right. And on the other side, you have this horseshoe coalition,
Exactly.
left-wing progressives and right-wing America First populists, people who disagree on practically every other issue in American life, completely united in their prioritization of non-interventionism, fiscal restraint, and domestic sovereignty.
It's wild. When you strip away the bureaucratic jargon of the NDAA, the debate over Section 224 is not just a routine funding measure.
Not at all.
It's a fundamental battle over who ultimately controls the future of the United States military's most sensitive, cutting-edge technology. It's a debate over how taxpayer money is potentially being moved from visible foreign aid packages into opaque Pentagon R&D line items to avoid public scrutiny.
So what does this all mean? At its core, it is a profound question of whether the United States is quietly sacrificing its own strategic independence just to maintain a foreign alliance.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Okay.
The source we reviewed heavily focused on the technological reality that data fusion is a bell that cannot be unrung.
Right.
Once two military nervous systems are connected, you cannot separate them. But consider the incredibly rapid pace of global geopolitical shifts. Alliances change. National interests evolve rapidly.
I mean, just look at how much the world map has shifted in the last 5 years alone.
Exactly. If Section 224 passes, and a decade from now, United States and Israeli foreign policy priorities completely diverge on a major global conflict.
Oh, wow.
How exactly does the Pentagon revoke administrative access to an artificial intelligence program that another country co-developed and currently operates on U.S. soil?
Yeah.
If our military's digital infrastructure is fully fused with another nation's today, who truly controls the off switch tomorrow?
It's a terrifying question, and one that every taxpayer and citizen should be asking as this bill moves through Congress. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the information around you, look closely at the legislation hiding behind the headlines, and we will catch you next time.